Alzheimer's is like a loose plug in a socket. And you're sitting next to a light and you're reading and the light starts to blink. And so you push the plug in. And then the light starts to blink some more and you push the plug in and it happens again. And now you're getting a little annoyed. Over time, the plug gets so loose, it falls out. You put it back in, it falls out. You put it back in. Pretty soon the plug is so loose it doesn't stay in the socket and the lights go dark.
Journalist Greg O'Brien offering a glimpse inside the mind of someone with Alzheimer's disease in the PBS Nova special, The Alzheimer's Crisis. Can it be stopped? O'Brien was diagnosed with this disease in 2009, but rather than succumb to it, he began to chronicle his experience, using his skill as a researcher and journalist to learn and record everything he knows about living with Alzheimer's into an extraordinary new book that provides a stark but ultimately uplifting insider's view of dementia. For more, let's welcome in from Newsmax Washington, the aforementioned Greg O'Brien, the author of the book on Pluto, Inside the Mind of Alzheimer's. And joining me here on the anchor desk, our Newsmax Health editor, Nick Tate. Nick, of course, the author of Da Vinci's Baby Boomer Survival Guide. Welcome to you both. And Greg, your book, very candid, talking about Alzheimer's. Now, it couldn't have been easy for you to write. What was the hardest part of putting the book together?
Well, the hardest part, I think, in putting any book together is the research and compiling. Just for background, my maternal grandfather died of Alzheimer's. My mother died of Alzheimer's. My paternal uncle died of Alzheimer's. And before my father died, he was diagnosed with dementia. After I started with the horrific symptoms, had the brain scan, SPECT scan, and clinical tests that confirmed the diagnosis. And then I had 2 serious head injuries that doctor said unmasked the disease. And I also carry the Alzheimer's gene, which I'm sure a lot of your viewers will know, APOE4. And because I had a front row seat with my family, I did go into the pity party and I got angry at God. And then I said, okay, why don't I use my muscle memory? And so I decided to compile about 2,000 pages of notes of everything I was afraid I'd forget.
Nick, on the health beat, let me ask you this. We just heard Greg talk about how this disease may be, the foundation comes a quarter century before it's made manifest. Are there numbers about the early onset of Alzheimer's?
There are. We tend to think about Alzheimer's as a disease of age. We tend to think that it's something that happens when you get older, but about 5% of the 5 million Americans that have Alzheimer's are actually under the age of 65. That's hundreds of thousands of Americans in their 40s and their 50s and early 60s who develop the symptoms. And as we heard Greg say, in many cases, the early signs and symptoms of that disease show up long before an official diagnosis, and those numbers are going to triple over the next 30 years.
Let me go back to Greg in Washington, because you obviously have written about this, you've dealt with it in the most personal of ways. And Greg, I'm just wondering if there's any message for those who are watching tonight, any type of hints about coping with this that you found, perhaps in the darker moments of dealing with this, that you'd like to share.
Well, there was a dark moment when I tried to take my life, and because I'd seen what happened to my family, and I didn't want to take my family and friends there, and the good Lord told me that's not my decision. So I've learned to walk in faith, hope, and humor, and my job is not to tell people what to believe in, but I have a strong traditional faith. Also, as a journalist, I've learned the strategies of the who, where, what, when, why, and how of life. And every morning before I get out of bed, it's like putting all the files in my brain back in place, because overnight someone had taken the files and dumped them on the floor, and I have to go through these steps of what am I doing, who am I doing. And there are times I go to the bathroom and you know, I've brushed my teeth at times with hand soap and you know, once gargled with rubbing alcohol. And so I write the names, rubbing alcohol, mouthwash on some of the bottles now. And you have to have strategies, you have to have faith, you have to have humor. Look, at Bugs Bunny once said, "Don't take life too seriously because nobody gets out alive." And my feeling is, as the baby boomers press forward against this tsunami, maybe we could try to, excuse me, do some good again. And you know, if by talking to other people I can be the canary in the coal mine, then that's given me purpose at a time when I feel I have no purpose, if that makes sense to you.
Greg O'Brien, able to discuss with rich imagery the challenge you face, the disease you're dealing with, and practical tips for dealing with it. God bless you, Greg. We thank you for your time and your insights tonight from Newsmax Washington, and of course Nick Tate, as you offer your perspective on the Health Beat. There's more ahead as Newsmax Prime continues.